I always thought it was just a cheap ripoff of Studio 54. But the reality was that it was the inspiration for Studio 54.
Today on Rainbow Country, a spotlight on a new gay documentary, Studio One Forever. And joining me to talk about the film is the film's award winning director and producer, Mark Saltarelli, and award winning writer, actor, producer, and not to mention funny person, Bruce Vilanch.
Hi there, I'm Bennett Singer, a documentary filmmaker and the co-director of the new film Cured, which is currently available on PBS and on the PBS video app. You are listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Mark Saltarelli, hi, how are you?
Hey, Mark. It's a pleasure to meet you, and thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Mr. Bruce Vilanch, hi, how are you?
Hi.
How are you, Mr. Bruce
I'm
Vilanch?
frequently uh, mistaken for Donna Kelsey, so I have to issue a disclaimer.
Oh, okay.
That's the look. It's the red hair, it's the blonde. I mean, the blonde hair, the red glasses.
Natural blonde.
Thank you.
I have to say thank you both for being here to have your voices, your stories be heard by the LGBT community and beyond, especially to talk about your award-winning documentary, Studio One Forever. Studio One Forever. Mark, you are the director, you are the editor, you are a co-producer. Talk to me about essentially the legacy that you're telling in this documentary, and essentially what is that legacy that you're telling in your film?
Well, Studio One was one of the very first gay discos in America. It started in 1974 by this amazing guy, Scott Forbes, who was an optometrist who wanted to open a gay disco. And, you know, back in 1974, that was a pretty bold thing to do. But it survived. It went through the amazing excitement of the 70s, and then, of course, the 80s came, and the tragedy of the AIDS crisis went. And so it was an opportunity, really, to look at that whole era of LGBTQ history through the lens of this incredible club that provided a safe space for so many gay men, primarily. And it wasn't without its issues. In the early days, it was very exclusive. Scott wanted only gay white men, and he had ways of keeping women out, like the no open-toed shoes policy, requiring multiple forms of ID. So we cover it all, warts and all, and it's really a journey through LGBTQ history.
And Bruce, for yourself, how did you get involved in this project? Talk to me about the origins for yourself.
Look at Mark. He called me. Look at him. How could I say no? The truth is, I was, I'm old enough to have been there. As I say in the movie, if you were around in the 70s and you say you remember it, you weren't there. But I was, and I have snatches of it still come back to haunt me. So I used to work at Studio One in the back lot, which was a nightclub in the back. And that's where Broadway divas would come in, like Chita Rivera and Bernadette Peters, and they would do their shows. And a lot of the times I was writing those shows. So I was there on that mission. And occasionally I would wander into across the DMZ into the disco in the front, where there were a lot of guys who didn't look like me, who were dancing and frolicking. And so I would kind of, mingle. I would try to navigate the dance floor. It was kind of like bringing the Queen Mary into a dock. And eventually I would go back to my space, the back up. But it was interesting to watch these worlds collide, the world of big time cabaret and the gay community carrying on. And it being Hollywood, there were big movie stars and big personalities for the first time mingling in what was essentially a gay environment and having a great time. So there was something very special was happening. And as the years went on, the place became a community center, more or less, for a gay community that had always gone out to places that were hidden because you were not allowed to be openly gay. And this was the first place where everybody was openly gay and it was celebrated. So that became a focal point later on as the AIDS epidemic started, and it was a part of all of that. And that's what the movie shows, how the community grew and how in this particular community in West Hollywood, Studio One was a linchpin for all of that.
And Bruce, can you talk to me about the origins of the backlot? How Liza Minnelli, Chito Rivera, and a heart attack essentially got that space going. Can you talk to me about that?
Well, Chito was rehearsing the original production of Chicago that Bob Fosse was staging, and with Gwen Verdon, and he had a heart attack, and they said you can't work for 3 months. You just have to lay low and do nothing. So the show was postponed, and everybody was sitting around twiddling their very, very well manicured thumbs. And Chito decided this would be a good time. Actually, somebody just decided for her, and she agreed that it would be a good time for her to do the nightclub act that she had always avoided doing because she was an actress, dancer. She was not a hello, good evening, hello, Cleveland. She was not that kind of a performer. So, but John Kander and Fred Ebb, who wrote Chicago, put it together for her. And Scott Forbes at the Backlot realized this would be a great opening thing for the cabaret that he had envisioned. And of course, when you open with a star like Chito, who was very well known in Hollywood, Hollywood turned out to see it. And it was the act where she introduced all that jazz because the show hadn't opened yet on Broadway, Chicago. So it was kind of a landmark thing. And once she was there, everybody wanted to play that room. It became the room to play. And it grew from that. And the acts that were booked there by Alan Eichler, who's one of our producers, were more and more unusual and interesting. Geraldine Fitzgerald, who was an actress, who would sing old songs and poetry and all that, and was captivating. And was a great friend and colleague of Betty Davis, who had brought her to Hollywood originally. She brought Betty Davis to Studio One as an audience member and introduced her. And once that got into the media, the place was a magnet. You couldn't keep people out of the backlot. You could keep them out of the disco, but you couldn't keep them out of the backlot.
Incredible history. Mark, this goes back to what, 2018?
2019.
What was there a moment, was there a flashpoint for you when you decided to make this documentary? Was there that moment?
Well, my friend Clifford Bell introduced me to Lloyd Coleman and Gary Steinberg, who were in the film. They were backlot producers of Monday Night Live, and they were planning. Actually, the developer was planning to demolish the building and build a multi-billion-dollar, luxury hotel complex on the site. And I found out through Lloyd and Gary that that this was happening, number one, and that these two women, Kate and Chrissy, developed the Save the Factory, that's the building that Studio One was housed in, campaign to let everybody know that they're going to demolish this building and our history. And they actually developed, a couple of years before I got involved, a 40-page document that had a lot of the people that I would go on to interview, and it read like a movie script almost. It was, I had been there in the 80s, and I have my memories of going there and being overwhelmed by the fantasy world that it was. But I had no idea what happened before I got there. I had no idea about the incredible 70s and how it was sort of, groundbreaking. And I always thought it was just a cheap ripoff of Studio 54. But the reality was that it was the inspiration for Studio 54. Halston and Steve Rubell actually were friends of Scott Forbes, the owner. They came, they saw it, and a couple of years later, Studio 54 came about. Of course, 54 was there for only about 2 years, and it was basically a crime scene. But Studio One was there for nearly 20 years, and it saw that entire period of time. And so we were working actually with the developer and had access to the building before it was going to be disassembled, but that's for the movie. And we started shooting interviews, and one of those interviews was Michael Koth, who I say is the heart of our film. He was the front bartender, and a lot of stars came to Studio One, and he was a star too. He was the first face that you would see for many years. And having him sitting there at his old station in this place, recounting his memories and his honesty and sharing his personal struggles and his story, I realized that we have something really special here. And so it was an evolution, you know. We slowly, thanks to Bruce and other people, found people. I think I went back to you, Bruce, at least 4 or 5 times. So we have multiple T-shirts. I should have coordinated costumes. You know, I wasn't thinking.
Many hair colors, styles,
Hair colors.
and weight levels in the movie.
And Bruce is just amazing. Of course, you know, he provides the majority of our comic relief. We all know that. But beyond that, he's an encyclopedia or Wikipedia, however you want to say it, of knowledge of Hollywood history, of LGBTQ history, and he's become my very good friend. And I don't know what the film would be like without Bruce, so I really appreciate it. So yeah, it was an evolution over years of finding the people. Some of them took a lot of work to try to convince them to be in the film, like Carol Taylor DiPietro. I had an amazing conversation early on with her for hours, and I knew that I had to have her in the film. She's a little bit shy, but she was actually the last interview we got, and I can't imagine what the film would be like without her.
She worked for Scott Forbes. She was his executive assistant, but she also worked at Disneyland.
Yeah.
She was a Disney cast member, and this was her side hustle, working with Scott, selling poppers and records in the boutique.
She's responsible, yeah.
Of course, two things that go hand in hand: poppers and records. Who knew?
And the mirrors with the little grooves in them. She won't say what that was for, but she's so cute. She's just adorable.
Mirror.
She's one of my favorite lines is, "Poppers were very popular at Studio One." Coming out of her mouth, that's, to me, is hilarious. But yeah. I mean, she is responsible for the very first gay night at Disneyland. You know, apparently they had to hide it. Back in those days, Disney didn't realize that their biggest fan base was gay people, but she's the reason for all of that happening, and you know, she should get her due for that.
Okay, so quote, "The most exciting woman on earth," unquote. That's from legendary filmmaker Orson Welles when talking about actor and chanteuse Eartha Kitt. Here's another quote. "Bruce, my love, where have you been since 1952? This is so Eartha," unquote. That is Eartha Kitt talking to Bruce Vilanch.
Wow.
Okay, so Bruce Vilanch, you co-wrote the tracks on Eartha Kitt's 1984 album, I Love Men. I have that album. The vinyl, baby. I have it. Can you please tell me about the history of the iconic gay song, Where Is My Man? Well, because there's an interesting story behind that song.
I know. In a nutshell, I wrote the first draft of a movie called Can't Stop the Music, which the Village People movie, from which I was fired when I asked for money after the third rewrite. But I somehow remained with the production. And Jacques Morali, who created the Village People, also did a thing in Paris every year for the Crazy Horse nightclub, which was where these Amazonian models with huge fake boobs would come out and lip sync to new songs recorded by famous people that Jacques knew. And he had Eartha. He'd made a deal with Eartha to do one of these songs, and he needed a song for her. And he called me and said, "Darling, I believe you can write lyrics." And he said, "The song is titled Where Is My Man? I'm sending you the tape." And so I got the tape. And of course, I didn't know Eartha at that point, but I knew Eartha, you know. So I wrote the thing to her, and he sent it to her. And he said, "We have to give her a demo. She won't understand otherwise." So I recorded a demo, in which, of course, I did Eartha Kitt. You know, I want a man who will kiss me and love me and all that stuff. And she got the demo, and she liked it very much. And she called me and she said, "You do a very good impression of me. If I hear you are getting paid for it, I will kill you." So that was the beginning of the relationship. And then later on, when we were recording the thing, which we did in New York, she turned to me, and at one point she said, "Drew, where have you been since 1952? That 1952 was when she made her big breakthrough in a show called New Faces, where she and Paul Lynde and Alice Ghostley were all in the show together. And Orson Welles knew her from when she was a dancer with Catherine Dunham at the Ballet Africain. But he was always very, very smitten with her. And I think she was smitten with him, but I'm sure once they got together, they realized it was Clash of the Titans. And it was not meant to be more than a casual sort of thing. And then Eartha and I became friends, and we did the entire album, I Love Men, and it brought her back, really. I mean, she was sitting in Connecticut not working because she'd gotten into political trouble during the Johnson administration, and she was on a lot of blacklists. And this brought her back as a disco star. And as I remarked, you know, after we'd made a lot of money, I said, "Eartha Kitt really is my favorite 12 inches." It was all vinyl, you know. And it charted all over the world, but not in the States, because they wouldn't play disco. They wouldn't play disco songs on the radio back then. So they were in an anti-disco mood.
It was a worldwide top 10 hit. So yeah. Bruce, you are a multi-award-winning artist. You won 2 consecutive Emmy Awards for your writing on the Oscars, on the Academy Awards. You were doing that from what, 2000 to 2014?
Well, I did 25 Oscar shows, starting with the infamous Rob Lowe Snow White show, which I've written about in the book, which is now available for pre-order on Amazon. It's about all the television shows I wrote in the 70s that were disasters. And Can't Stop the Music is in there too. It's called It Seemed Like a Bad Idea at the Time. So lots of funny stories. That's my side promotion here.
But what was it like writing for the Oscars?
It's kind of like playing in the Super Bowl. I mean, you know that anything that's good, they will remember. And if it's terrible, it will live with you for the rest of your life, because it's the biggest show in the world. It's live. It goes all over the place. And so the pressure is on. Those 2 shows were Billy Crystal shows. The first one was the one where we famously jettisoned a lot of the script because his co-star in City Slickers, Jack Palance, got up on stage and started doing one-arm push-ups when he won his Oscar. And so it was too good to resist. But what people don't realize is Jack Palance's first line in his acceptance speech was, "Billy Crystal, I crap bigger than that." So the bar was set. It was set low, but the bar was set for us to come back with a lot of jokes. And we won an Emmy for essentially rewriting the show on the fly in the biggest show in the world. So they gave us an Emmy, and then they gave us an Emmy for the show next year, where we did a lot of jokes about the show the previous year. And I'm delighted, but you know, and I've lost more Emmys than I've won. I've lost a whole bunch of Emmys.
Well done to you, Mark. We've been talking about films. We're talking about music in your documentary. Talk to me about what that process was like to get some of those songs. You've got like Donna Summer's "Dim All the Lights" and others. What was that process like?
Well, that probably was the most difficult part of the entire process, and that's probably why it took so many years to finally get it finished. When I started putting it together, I kind of went a little crazy. I mean, I knew at some point we're going to have to deal with paying for all of this. And I think the first budget for the songs that I had was about, I don't know, $500,000. So obviously I had to find other ways. You know, we have a lot of original songs, and that's all thanks really to Alan Eichler, who not only is an amazing part of the film, you know, he he booked Geraldine Fitzgerald and had Betty Davis introduce her. And he came with all of these incredible photos. Anyway, fast forward, we had some fundraising screenings, and he was blown away by the film, and he said, "I would like to help you," and indeed he did. And because of his incredible contribution, we were able to, I had to reduce the budget considerably, obviously, but we were able to get the film finished. You mentioned Donna Summer. Originally, I wanted "I Feel Love," but they wouldn't go for that for the rate we were going for. So, but they gave us "Dim All the Lights," which is amazing as well. Some of the songs that we just couldn't afford. I have an amazing guy, Jake Simpson, who was a Star Search winner. He's gay. He lives in the Midwest, and he is a disco freak. He has a studio that has all of the original, equipment from the era of disco music. And I would say, can you just create something that has kind of this feeling of a song? And within a day, he would be sending me this amazing piece of music. So without Jake's support, I don't know how we would have gotten this film done. And I defy anyone to tell me that, it's not the original song in some cases because of Jake's amazing work. So yeah, it's been quite a process. But after 4 years, we completed it. And finally, it's out to the world, streamable. And by the way, Eartha Kitt, there's an archival clip on the DVD and Blu-ray, if anybody still has those machines, on there, along with Chita Rivera's entire uncut interview, a lot of scenes that I had to delete, and an amazing commentary with me and Bruce and Stephen Israel of us babbling over the movie. So please watch the movie first, because you won't know what's going on otherwise.
So this movie covers some really, really amazing gay history. And the fact that, the film Tommy, the musical, had its premiere, I guess, after party there.
Yeah.
And you guys have the archival footage of that, and you've got like Diana Ross and all this sort of stuff. Mark, talk to me about the process of sourcing out all of those archival materials. What was that process like?
Equally difficult was that process. I have two incredible archival producers who worked with me. I don't know if they realized what they were getting into, but it took months. I mean, we have a spreadsheet that goes on for pages, because I went a little crazy. I mean, the movie goes by at a quick clip. And each of those stills, each of those clips had to be either declared fair use from an attorney, or we had to pay for them. And they had to be sourced, they had to be, it was just an amazingly difficult process. I mean, I knew that making a documentary film with a lot of archival would be difficult, but I guess I didn't understand it completely, or I may not have taken this job on. But because of Alexandra Margolin and Austin Wilkin working with me and not giving up, we got through it. And actually, most of it was declared fair use. We had to pay for a few things, but I'm just proud that I didn't give up, because there were moments when it became overwhelming, and I wasn't sure if we would ever be able to make the money that we needed to get this finished. But I'm so glad I didn't, because the response has been amazing.
And Bruce, for yourself, you were there. You worked at the back lot. Going back and being part of this project, how was that for you? Was it cathartic? What was it like reliving some of those moments?
Well, it was wonderful. I mean, I hadn't thought about a lot of it in a long time. But I mean, I realized I was a part of it all. But with what the clips you mentioned, actually, interestingly enough, both of those things were Alan Carr productions. I mean, Alan managed Anne Margaret, and so when the Tommy people went to him and hired him to promote the movie, because he was an ace promoter, and he organized that premiere at Studio One. And of course, he also shot part of Can't Stop the Music at Studio One, because he was a big fan of Studio One, because he would find people that he could wrestle with later on whenever he showed up. So he was, and he's kind of fallen out of favor because he produced that infamous Rob Lowe Oscar show that I wrote, but not that far. But so I was reliving all of that. I mean, there's a picture of in the documentary of me and Alan and Patrick Swayze at the Oscars, I think. But Swayze came to Studio One as well, so it was kind of liberating. I was thinking, well, I did have fun. You go back and you just remember the stuff that didn't work out, and you forget about the stuff that actually was good. And it's good.
And it's also part of the documentary, but there was a reunion that was I guess when they were talking about demolishing the building. How did the reunion come about? Was that because of the film or because of the potential loss of the site?
Yeah, the reunion was sort of what was the hook for me in many ways, because it provided an event. It was already planned, it was in the works, but it sort of became kind of our set for the movie as we went along. And I always knew that would be our third act, bringing all these people back, and we couldn't have hoped for a better outcome of the reunion. They actually gave away free tickets to everybody, and not expecting that many people to show up, but literally everybody showed up, and I think it was 2 hours delayed, so I had plenty of time to go through the line waiting outside and to help people not be so angry for waiting around, and find all of the people who would be or were a part of the film and have them do a little kind of recap of what we've seen, and to just get from other people, what the place meant to them, and it meant so much. And even if it was delayed for 2 hours, people didn't really complain once they got in. It was just a joyous celebration. The dance floor was opened up again. We had Thelma Houston saying goodbye with "Don't Leave Me This Way," and we covered it all, and it was the perfect third act for our film, and yep, it was beautiful.
Mark, I asked this question to Bruce in the process of, researching this project and making this project. You were obviously reliving your time there. You were saying in the 80s. What was it like for you to relive some of those moments when you were there?
Well, I came out in Illinois at the University of Illinois, a small college town. Came to LA, and I went to Loyola Marymount. I couldn't get into USC, but Loyola is an amazing film school. And I, like everybody at that time, heard about Studio One. It was in the gray rags with full page ads with half naked guys. And so every weekend, not every weekend, but most weekends, I would travel to West Hollywood, and I was rather shy, so I wasn't the guy that ripped his shirt off and started joining the mob, but I loved just watching it. And so those were my memories. And of course, I went through the 80s, and a lot of my friends were dying as well. And that's really an important part of this film. Not only the joy and the freedom that it provided, but it became almost a sacred space. It hosts the first AIDS fundraiser for APLA was hosted by Joan Rivers, and Melissa Rivers does an incredible interview about her mom. And so it's the joy and the pain that the movie kind of brings together. All of the interviews, would basically go the same way as the film does. The first part is happiness and joy and freedom, and then, like it happened back then, we're hit with this thing, this AIDS crisis, and everybody's dying, and somehow the dance footage represents both the joy and the pain in such a beautiful way, and it's cathartic. All of the interview subjects would ultimately, when we get to AIDS, which I always save for last, would break down and have a catharsis, because it's still there. I mean, like Gypsy said last night, the forever in the title is the most important word in the title, because those days stay with people. It's a PTSD. And that's why this ugly building meant so much to so many people, and why they banded together and tried to save it from just being demolished, and taught the developer, what the building represented to the survivors of this lost generation. As John Duran, the former mayor of West Hollywood, says, in this very tiny little area of West Hollywood, over 10,000 people died. It was, as Bruce says, our own kind of Holocaust. And it's important to remember. I think the reason the history was kind of lost, possibly, is because it was too painful to remember for so long, and people kind of wanted just to let it go away. But because of this amazing group of people who agreed to share their honesty, the stories, Michael Koth, his honesty about his addiction problems. At first, his addiction was all about having a great time, but then the 80s rolls around and it became, I have to have this just to block out what was happening during those times. And it kind of brings maybe a little bit more understanding about what we went through. And, obviously for people who went through that period, that's the main core audience. But, even I forget the way the world was back then, because we've come so far so quickly. But mostly, I really hope that the younger generation of LGBTQ people who are kind of reaping the benefits of what our forefathers went through, the fight and even dying to get the rights we have. I really hope that they can see it. And the young guys who have, are really moved by it. And they tell me that, I had no idea what you guys went through. And you guys seem so much more connected than we are today. And it's true, they're watching their 30-second TikTok videos. And if they're at a bar, they're on the phone. That's not really connecting with people. So I hope they will take 90 minutes and, get a little understanding of what happened.
So I just have a handful of minutes left with the two of you. And so here's my last question. So Studio One Forever, it did a really successful film festival run, won a number of awards, Best of Fest, Best LGBTQ Film, Best Documentary. Bruce, what do you hope audiences come away with after they've seen Studio One Forever?
If they didn't realize there was a community before, they do now after seeing it. And I think that they realize that there's more to it than just boom, boom, boom and hedonism. And the generation that, of course, has grown up with people not dying of AIDS, so because there is a cocktail that they can take to prevent it, or to ameliorate it, but they don't realize what went on before. They don't realize the struggle that the generation before them had, and I think that they will come away with an education and a sense of what the joy was all about, and what the loss was, and how we replenish ourselves afterwards. I mean, I think that's what they go thinking it's going to be a movie about like the Studio 54. It's going to be about famous people doing face plants on the dance floor, but in fact, it's about a whole lot more than that. It's about joy and loss and community and building and all of that.
And Mark, for yourself, I just have a couple minutes left. What do you hope audiences come away with after they've seen your amazing award-winning documentary, Studio One Forever?
Yeah, I hope that, again, the younger generation will find it and take the time to watch it. We actually have an educational distributor added to our distributor, and we hope to get it into universities, and it can be a tool for, I always say, what Studio One did was we were the other, and Studio One merged the Hollywood community with the gay community for the first time, as far as I can tell. And when you get to know people as human beings, rather than a stereotype, they are not the other anymore. They are humans, and that's what I really hope, that people can have an understanding of our community as human beings, and in this moment right now, as things seem to be going backwards, it's important to remember what happened and how we got to the place we are before it goes away again.
Well said, well said. Mark Saltarelli, Bruce Vilanch, well said, well done, well filmed, well made. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Mark.
Pleasure. Thank you.